So thank you, Malaka, for giving me your time today.
Thank you for having me, Deepak.
And I'm very excited that we are going to talk about your books and your life and everything.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, so I was born in Arlington, Texas, and I grew up with my dad, who's Egyptian American, and my mom, Filipino. Actually, he's Egyptian; they're immigrants, and my mom, who's Filipino, in Texas for a few years, and then my parents got divorced, and then I moved with my mom to California, where I spent most of my upbringing in Southern California. My dad eventually moved back to Egypt after they got a divorce and remarried several times. And in Egypt, uh, he and my mom had an arrangement where I would go and visit him and spend the entire summer with him, essentially, um, in Egypt, growing up. So from the ages of like 9 to 25, I would be with my dad in the summertime or in the wintertime when I started working. Um, and and I'd be like immersed in Egyptian daily family life. And then with my mom, I was living in a pretty Filipino household in Southern California. And in my household, I lived with my uncle, Tito Maro. So not only was I living in a predominantly Asian community, in our home, Tagalog was spoken. That was a language that was spoken. But we kids, I have a younger sister who is full Filipino. We spoke English back to them when they spoke to us in Tagalog.
Very nice. Do you speak Tagalog fluently now?
No, I understand Tagalog fluently, but I don't know how to speak it. But in Arabic, I can speak like kitchen Arabic, like,
Hmm.
turn off the light,
Hmm.
put the bread in the stove, things like that. But I don't know how to speak it fluently.
Very nice. So Arlington, Virginia, right?
Arlington, Texas.
Arlington, Texas. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Arlington, Texas. That's okay. So Texas and then California and then summers in Egypt, right?
Yes.
Okay. You also mentioned in your book that one of the times, like when you grew up a little bit older, you went to Doha to see your family instead of Egypt. We'll talk
Yeah.
about that later. So you also visited Middle East. I mean, like that part of the world
Yeah.
also,
I
right?
got to spend time in the Gulf when my dad had actually moved to the Gulf when I was around maybe in my late teens. He moved to the Gulf,
Hmm.
and he was working there, and so I visited my family when they were there.
Hmm. Thank you so much. So when you're going to school in America as a kid, like kindergarten and then first grade, second grade, did you have any um, trouble or any kind of fitting in issues fitting in with other kids who like trying to explain to them who am I? Am I Filipino? Am I just a regular American kid, or I'm also Egyptian? Or the kids didn't matter. They didn't care. They just wanted to have fun with Malaka.
Ha! Well, as a younger person, I was extremely lonely and isolated. I Not only was I the only Filipino Egyptian in my school, I was also a bit of a chubby kid, and I was kind of a know-it-all and sort of annoying. So I didn't have very many friends growing up. Um, in my school, it was predominantly Filipino, and and there were Egyptians, in fact, Coptic Egyptians, a smaller number of them, but it was mostly Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
And they often say that was my dog. Sorry, they
It's okay,
often
no problem.
in a when you talk to immigrants about when they're growing up, what they wish they were like. A lot of people, immigrant kids, a lot of people will say like, I wish that I could, be like the white people I saw on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Which to some extent that was true for me when I got into high school and like started getting into pop culture and stuff. But in my early ages, when Filipino girls were like my only reference point, of who was popular. My greatest wish was to have like long straight hair like the Filipino girls, and like, you know, that was mostly, it like look more Filipino like the Filipino girls, because I wanted to be in their in group. And I can still name all of my enemies, the people who were the popular group now, because I had spent so much of my headspace thinking and reflecting about scheming how to like get in with them. And
Mm-hmm.
this was a school that was kindergarten through ninth grade. So it tormented me for the majority of my life, like figuring out how to get in with them. And I think this stemmed a lot from, I guess, again, like loneliness and feeling like I didn't really fit in. And I also had an Arab name as well. Like I went to a
Hmm.
Catholic school, so having an Arab Muslim name
Hmm.
in a Catholic school is like full of
Right.
Filipino. Just like I was already an outlier, you know?
Right, right. So it's very interesting because I didn't grow up in America, but I have a daughter who grew up in America, and through her, I've learned that Indian kids who grew up in America, right,
Yeah.
and they go to when in their growing up years, they try to be more like white kids,
Yeah.
instead of try to be more like Indian kids. So yours was different. You wanted to be more like the Filipino girls, like fit in with their to be in their in group.
Yeah, but once I got into high school, I think that I really wanted to fit in more with like the predominantly white,
Mhm.
um, you know, culture. I wanted to fit in with predominantly white culture, and I don't really know where that came from. Probably just, the zeitgeist and like all the messaging that I was getting at the time from my parents, who were always telling me to observe white people and
Mm,
how they behave, because one day I'm going to be in that society and I need to know how to operate. Essentially, that's what they were telling me.
right.
But yes, at our school, even it was interesting because I was thinking about like we had a lot of Indian. I went to a predominantly Asian school
Right.
where there were a lot of like Indian kids and like Pakistani kids,
Mhm.
Korean kids, Taiwanese kids, Filipino kids. And it's so interesting because everybody wanted to be as far away from like fresh off the boat people, like new immigrants as possible.
This is very interesting. Keep going.
So like for example, like you never wanted to like let's say you had a first generation Indian kid, my friend
Right.
Harsh, for example.
Right.
Like we didn't want to be associated too much with like Indians who had like just come to the United States. In
Right.
fact, I interviewed one of my Indian friends recently,
Right.
and asked her that she didn't. She said that she didn't want to do any of the Indian dance classes because that might deem her too Indian. There
My
was like a
goodness.
fine line.
Right. Right. So you can be Indian. You can hold on to some of your values, but you don't want to be seen as totally like coming straight from India, right?
Yeah, and same with all Filipinos and Koreans. There were like the Korean group for, second
Right.
generation Koreans, and then there was the Korean group for like the people who were just like here for school, but then we're going to move back to Korea for college. If you know what I mean. So
What do
people
you
really
think,
go ahead.
Malaka? What do you think? What is the psyche behind that mindset? Like, why? What is wrong with like being friends with people who are coming straight from India
Well,
or wherever?
I think that there was this like unspoken rule where like you didn't want to be seen as fobby. For some reason,
Hmm.
like everybody was fronting to try to be Americanized, like as Americanized as possible. And at the time in my teenage brain, to be as Americanized as possible was to be as influenced by white culture as possible at the time.
Hmm.
So I think that people wanted to shed any associations that they were possibly Asian, which is hilarious because like every time we would go to another kid's school, I mean, another kid's house for like a school project, everybody had an immigrant household. You had to
Right.
take
Right.
before you come in, and like you just I think that we were hiding that we had immigrant parents, which was
Hmm.
very funny. Um, yeah, I think, and then I also think that like there's this is a slightly different answer to your question, but I think it's interesting enough to talk about. But like at my school, there was also this like hierarchy of Asians, like, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but like, at the top of this food chain hierarchy was like East Asians, like Japanese, Korean, and Chinese kids. And then below that were like dark-skinned Asians, like
Mm.
Filipinos or Bangladeshis or,
Hmm.
um, people from Vietnam, for example.
Right.
And so I think that there was always this pecking order that people were thinking about subconsciously in the back of their mind.
Hmm.
At least it was on mine.
Right.
It's like,
Right. Right.
I remember going to classes where it was like AP chemistry, for example, and I was one of
Right.
the few Filipino people in the class. The majority of the class were Koreans and Chinese people and
Hmm.
Taiwanese kids. And I just remember feeling like I had to justify why I was in this class.
Wow.
Like, why are you here? And it's like, well, it's just a fluke that I randomly passed the test to like get into AP chemistry. Isn't that crazy? And I didn't believe like that
Right,
I
right.
could be like the smart Asians, you know?
That's very interesting. Very interesting. So yeah, I mean, there is subtle ways of subtle examples of racism within the Asian population, right? And like
Yeah.
you're discriminating against each other, who has
Yeah.
just come from India or Taiwan or Vietnam, who's slightly less darker than me, this and that. It's like it's very fascinating.
Or even growing up in Southern California, there's like a high number of people from like a party number of people from South America and Central America, and like Mexicans would be like, oh no, I'm not El Salvadorian, like, or I'm not Honduran. They just want to make sure that distinction is made. Like
Right, right,
these
right,
little tiny, I guess, like microaggressions against other races was like very
right,
felt.
right, right. Exactly. Well, thank you. So you've written two books. You work as an editor, right, for NPR, but you're
Yep.
also a novelist. You've written two brilliant books, and can we talk a little bit about them?
Yeah,
The
sure.
books,
Yeah.
yeah. Your recent book, which is about things won't be always this. What is the title again?
It won't always be like this.
It won't be. It won't always be like this. So you've dedicated that book to Hala,
Yeah.
right? And you talk about going to Egypt a lot every summer, and it was heartbreaking. Actually, it made me cry when your dad, had to. I started giving stuff away, a lot to you, back to your mother, and packing his things, and he took you for ice cream on the beach, and he said like, I don't know when I'll be back, and he went back, and then you went to see him, but then he was also there was a woman in his house, right, Hala, and then he was actually married, and you saw how comfortable he was with her. He was she was making tea or chai or whatever, and doing things that he could have done, but he was also very comfortable letting her do it, and that annoyed you a little bit. And it's interesting. I saw the arc of the book is like you were going to visit your dad, but you were actually more connecting to Hala. You were more closer to her. You connected to her somehow, right? Can you
Yeah.
talk about? Yeah.
I think that I didn't really understand how that happened until my dad and I talked during the book process. So I
Mhm.
worked very closely with Hala and my dad on this book.
Mhm.
And he said that, like, I guess like because I was always at work, I left that emotional part to her to really help make sure that you had a nice time when you were in Egypt. And
Mhm.
not only that, my stepmom also revealed to me later that she had heard that I had a bad experience with my first stepmom.
Mhm.
And my dad has remarried several times. Hala is number two and
Okay.
number three in the
Okay.
order of marriages.
Okay.
My dad just got his fourth divorce, by the way.
Oh,
And so he's
sorry.
at it. He's going at it, and he's
Okay.
dating
Oh,
again.
great. Okay. But you're in touch with Hala, which is great.
Yeah, I'm touching. Yeah, and Hala said that, like, I didn't have a good experience with the first stepmom, so she wanted to make sure that I was loved and cared for, and that I had a lot of attention. And I didn't know that these intentional choices by the adults around me
Mhm.
were being made on my behalf and on for my benefit.
Mhm.
It made me think that, I had such a lonely childhood, but I had all these amazing people around me, all these adults really, who like really minded me and cared for me,
Right.
and were really out for my well-being. And
Mhm.
just like it's very moving to think about that and to see that. I'm glad I took a moment with this book to
Right.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was also as a kid, as a 9-year-old kid, 10-year-old kid, it's hard to understand. Like I'm growing up in America, right? And I speak English. I hardly speak any Arabic or Tagalog. My mom is Filipino, and I come here every summers. And my dad goes to work. Who is my dad and mother? My this woman Hala is not my mother, but I seem to connect with her. So a child who has a very impressionable age at that age can be confused. Trying to figure out what's going on. Who am I? Who actually loves me? Where is my real home? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that kids are so resilient and they just kind of go with the flow. And what's I think what's wild is that I don't think I would have ever reached the conclusions that I reached, at the end of my book, which was like, a lot of people cared for me. It was very intentional that I was brought to Egypt.
Hmm.
My dad really wanted to forge a family relationship with me and his step family. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't sat and thought about it. I would have probably gone my whole life just like feeling resentful or,
Hmm.
feeling confused about that. So
Hmm.
I do think it's everyone should take the time to ask their parents questions. Life is too short. Ask their parents questions about things that they didn't understand, or if it's not too painful to rehash. And you might be surprised with your parents' willingness to answer. I felt
Right,
like,
right, right.
immigrant parents don't tend to be super emotionally available to their
Mm.
kids. In Asian culture, for example, in Filipino culture, it's not really seen. It's impolite to like talk about feelings or deep things too much in conversation.
To be able to even to say, "Mom, I love you," can be hard, right?
Yeah, and even in Filipino culture, we don't really do kissing. We do a
Mhm.
sniff of the cheek,
Right, right, right,
like that.
right, right.
So it's not really like it's not something that you feel super comfortable about. But sometimes if you don't try, if it's a question you really want to know and the answer to, and you don't try asking, then you
Right,
know.
right, right. Thank you. And also in that book, you one time when your dad was at work and Hala was watching it, TV after washing her dishes and everything, and you were looking out the balcony and you saw a friend across in a different building, right? I forget her name, Amari
Amira,
or
Amira.
Amira, and she came. You went to her house, right? And they sat you down and started asking a bunch of questions like, are you American? What's your mother like? And do you speak this? Do you speak that? And what about religion? Are you Muslim? And you like left after an hour feeling exhausted. So I want to talk about religion. You said you went to the Catholic mass, right? In
Yeah, I went to
Philippines,
Catholic
right?
school,
Right,
and my
exactly.
mom was very Catholic.
Okay.
She always experienced visions of the Virgin Mary, so it
Mm,
was something that was very, very deeply important in her life.
right.
And then my father was just, I mean, he was a practicing Muslim. He
Mm,
prays 5 times a day. He goes to the
mm,
mosque. Not always 5 times a day, but most prayers he gets to. He goes
right.
to the mosque. It was really important for him to teach me surahs, like
Mm,
to memorize parts of the Quran.
mhm,
And he was really serious, so serious that he used to record tapes of him saying the
mm,
surah, and says like, okay, now you repeat back to me. Okay, now it's your turn. So then he would leave a space for me to like say it in the tape.
right.
Um, so he's very serious about that. And um,
So are you a religious person or you just
yeah,
follow everything?
so I think that my growing up with these two parents who've deeply respected religion, it made me want to respect it too. Like I
Mhm,
would never want to say anything about Catholicism that would hurt my mom, or say anything about Islam that would hurt my dad. And I
mhm,
always tried to practice their religion when I was with them.
mhm,
Um, but of course, that left me feeling very confused because there were so many elements about both religions that I really liked. So
mhm,
I really love in Islam, for example, that there's only one God. It's very
mhm.
clear.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense to me,
Mhm,
and it's a nice concept. There's
right.
one supreme being.
Right.
And then the thing about Catholicism that is that I really like the fact that there was a Virgin Mary, that there were saints, there were all these like figures and deities who were like looking out for you. I thought that was great also.
Mm,
So I think in my mind, when I was a young person, I would just sort of mixed all the religions together in my mind
mm.
and like pray like, okay, dear God, but not Jesus, but Virgin Mary, I'd
Right,
pray
right,
that.
right.
And as an adult, I think that I probably follow that. I like the tenets of Islam a little bit more than I do Christianity,
Mm,
because it just makes more logical sense to me. But I mean, all
mhm,
religions, whatever religion you want to be. I'm a spiritual person. I do believe in God, and
mhm,
just how to worship Him or
mhm,
her
mhm.
or them, whoever God is.
Yeah,
Um, like it's just really up to. I just kind of make up
right.
some stuff in my mind.
Thank you. Do you mind if I ask you a little bit about your spouse? What's their religion? his religion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My spouse grew up Southern Baptist, and
Oh
he
wow.
comes from his grandfather is a Southern Baptist preacher,
Hmm.
and his uncle is a Southern Baptist preacher, and you know, you know, religion is really, really important in that side of the family.
Hmm.
What was really cool was that in our wedding we had granddaddy, who is the
Hmm.
Southern Baptist minister,
Hmm.
deliver our. He basically did our ceremony,
Hmm.
and in a lot of Christian ceremonies it is very Christian related. But what he did in the ceremony was that he incorporated elements of Islam and
Hmm.
incorporated elements of Christianity, and made it
Wow.
into this like really beautiful sermon. And
Hmm.
I thought that my dad and my Arab family would find this sacrilege, like that
Hmm.
we did this. But my
Hmm.
dad was really grateful. He like went up to him after the ceremony and shook his hand and said thank you.
Hmm.
So that was really nice.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. One last question is that, so you consider yourself American or Egyptian American, Filipino American, or all of that?
Yeah. So when I think about identity,
Hmm.
I do identify as Filipino Egyptian American, and I'm very proud to say that. And I don't feel like it's like a third,
Hmm.
like I'm 33% Filipino, 33% Filipino. I mean, I'm
Right.
Egyptian,
Right.
33% American. I really do feel like I'm 100% of all of those things. I
Wow.
mean, um, my, my, yeah, nothing. I mean, even if I wasn't Egyptian, I felt like I have enough knowledge to be Filipino American to like hold me through. If I
Hmm.
wasn't Filipino, I'd have enough Egyptian American knowledge to pull me through, et cetera, et cetera.
So you're 100% all three of those things.
Yeah, I just like feel like I just like weave in and out of those cultures like as the situation pops up.
That's beautiful, right?
It
It's
is really
wonderful.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
like a superpower. I do feel like really special to be able to identify as so many things. It's such a cool feeling when I overhear somebody speaking Arabic and I'll be like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
like I understand exactly what you're saying. Or like somebody speaking Tagalog and I'm like,
Right.
yeah. And also like, here's some other information about my family. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like,
And you also can connect and understand the subtle things in those two different cultures, right?
yes.
Immediately without you being explained anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you
Sure.
so much.
Thank you.